Riker needed a hyperdrive. Nothing else mattered. His Corvette lay gutted outside the bazaar, its engines fried after a crash through the atmosphere of a nameless desert world. Without parts, he'd be stranded, a human alone under the burning suns, easy prey for the Hegemony's patrols. He moved through the market like a ghost, scanning stalls stacked with scavenged coils, cracked conduits, and overpriced junk. He had only enough credits to buy one shot at survival. That's when he heard it. A voice, soft and hoarse, carried through the noise of traders and shouting vendors. Please, buy me. Riker froze. The words had come from a side stall, one draped in shadows. He turned and saw her, a girl, alien, her wrists chained in bronze cuffs. Her skin shimmered faintly, like starlight caught in glass, and her eyes, wide, pleading, locked on his. She wasn't merchandise, she was property. He told himself to keep walking. He told himself it wasn't his fight. But then she whispered again, barely audible over the clamor. They'll kill me if you don't. Riker stepped closer, anger simmering beneath his ribs. The slaver behind the stall smirked, baring yellowed teeth. Rare stock, he said. Not cheap, but maybe you can afford her, off-worlder. He gestured lazily to the girl, as if she were nothing more than a broken tool. Riker should have walked away. He needed a hyperdrive, not another burden. But something in her eyes, fear layered with defiance, made the decision for him. He slammed his credits onto the counter. I'll take her. The transaction was quick. The chains were unlocked. The girl swayed, weak from hunger, and Riker caught her before she fell. She whispered her name, Avalyn, and then she said something that stopped his breath cold. They chained me because of what I know. That night, hidden in the wreck of his ship, she told him the truth. She wasn't just another slave. She had been bred as a servant to the Hegemony's inner circle. She had overheard whispers no one outside the High Council was ever meant to hear. The Hegemony fears humanity, she whispered, her voice shaking. They say your kind cannot be controlled, so they plan to erase you. Riker's blood ran cold. The galaxy already lived under the shadow of the Hegemony's cruelty. But this was extermination. If Avalyn was right, her knowledge was enough to ignite a war, or end one. And the reason she had begged for his help was clear. The Hegemony would kill her before they ever let the truth spread. He stared at the broken hyperdrive on his Corvette, then at the girl huddled in his blankets. He had come to this planet to survive, but now survival seemed meaningless. Riker made his choice. With scraps from the bazaar and Avalyn's whispered guidance, he rebuilt the Corvette piece by piece, not just to escape, but to carry her secret off-world. Every hour was a risk. Patrols circled the desert. Informants prowled the markets. Twice strangers came too close to his ship, and twice he drove them off with his blaster. Finally, as the twin suns bled into the horizon, the Corvette roared back to life. Avalyn clutched the co-pilot's chair as they lifted off, chains still clattering faintly at her wrists. But they weren't free yet. The Hegemony had learned. 3 interceptors rose from the dunes, engines burning like blue fire. Their comms crackled across the channel. Return the property or die. Riker grinned, a reckless fire in his eyes. Property? Not today. The battle was chaos. Plasma fire lit the skies. Riker's ship screamed as bolts tore through the hull, but his hands never wavered. He danced through the enemy formation with maneuvers no Hegemony pilot had ever seen. A human's defiance woven into every twist and burn. When the last interceptor exploded in a blossom of flame, silence returned. Avalyn looked at him, her eyes wide with awe and something more. Hope. They had survived, but survival was just the beginning. Because now the galaxy would know. Avalyn's truth would spread. And Riker, the mechanic who only wanted a hyperdrive, had become something far more dangerous. He had become the man who carried the secret the Hegemony would kill to keep hidden. And humanity had just found its spark of rebellion. What Avalyn knew could expose a conspiracy, and Riker had already chosen to hear it. The desert winds howled outside the gutted Corvette, rattling hull plates like bones in a shallow grave. Inside, shadows danced across the cabin as the flickering lanterns sputtered against the dry air. Riker sat across from the girl he had bought from the slaver's stall. Avalyn, her wrists still raw where the bronze cuffs had cut into her silvered skin. She hadn't spoken much since he carried her out of the market. Fear was still coiled inside her, but beneath it burned something sharper. defiance. Finally, Riker broke the silence. You said they chained you because of what you know. Start talking. Her eyes lifted to meet his, shimmering in the half-light. The hegemony is lying. The wars, the shortages, the disappearances, they're not accidents of fate. They're engineered, manufactured. Riker felt the words like stones sinking in his gut. Everyone whispered about corruption in the hegemony, but hearing it spoken aloud was different. Engineered how? Avalyn's voice cracked, but she pressed on. I was a servant inside the High Council's chambers. I wasn't supposed to listen, but I heard them. They're building fleets in hidden shipyards, weapons that can erase whole colonies, and they keep the worlds obedient by fear, by blaming everything on imaginary enemies. Her hands trembled as she gripped the blanket he'd thrown over her shoulders. I recorded some of it. Files, proof. That's why they chained me. They couldn't kill me in the council hall, so they sold me, thinking no one would believe a slave's words. Riker leaned back, his mind spinning. He'd heard rumors of ghost fleets, of colonies swallowed by silence. Now those whispers had a face, a girl who had been brave or foolish enough to listen when she shouldn't have. You realize what you're saying? He asked, his voice low. If you're right, then every planet under the hegemony is living a lie. And anyone who hears this truth, they won't stop hunting you. Her reply was a whisper, but it cut deeper than any shout. That's why I begged you, because you were human. Riker stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? Avalyn's eyes softened. The Council fears your kind more than any other. They call you reckless, uncontrollable. They say humans can't be bent to the chain. That's why they'll exterminate you first if their secret comes out. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the rasp of desert wind. Riker's jaw tightened. He had come here for a hyperdrive, nothing more. Yet somehow he had stumbled into a storm that stretched far beyond his own survival. You want me to carry this, he muttered, to take your secret and broadcast it across the stars. You're asking me to make myself the most hunted man in the sector. Avalyn's gaze didn't waver. No, I'm asking you to help me make them afraid. Afraid of truth. Afraid of what happens when the galaxy learns the humans are not so easily silenced. For the first time in years, Riker felt something stir in his chest. Not anger, not fear. Something heavier. Duty. He stood and crossed the cramped cabin, prying open a locker. From its depths, he pulled a battered datapad and set it in her hands. Show me what's worth dying for. Her fingers brushed the cracked screen, and lines of encrypted files glowed faintly in the dark. Voices spilled into the cabin. Cold, cruel, unmistakable. The counselors themselves, speaking of fleets in shadow, of enemies invented, of exterminations planned. It was undeniable. Riker felt his throat tighten. The hegemony wasn't just corrupt. It was a machine of fear, and now he had seen its gears. He turned back to Avalyn, her face pale but resolute. You're right, he said. Staying silent would be worse. Outside, the desert winds shifted, carrying the faint roar of approaching engines. Patrol ships. The hegemony had already begun its hunt. Riker checked his blaster, then looked back at her. If they want you, they'll have to come through me first. Avalyn nodded, her chains clinking softly as she whispered. Then we fight together. The girl who had been sold as property. The mechanic who only wanted a hyperdrive. And a secret too dangerous to ignore. The storm was coming, and they were already in the middle of it. The truth was out. Now they had to survive long enough to share it. The datapad lay between them, its cracked screen glowing faintly in the gloom. Riker couldn't tear his eyes from the words scrolling across it. Minutes from the High Council, unfiltered, unambiguous. Plans for extermination disguised as defense. Shipyards hidden in black zones. Entire colonies erased from the map with the flick of a pen. It was one thing to hear Avalyn whisper the truth. It was another to see it written in the Council's own language. They'll kill for this, Riker muttered, voice low. They already have, Avalyn replied. Her silvered skin gleamed faintly in the lantern light, her wrists still raw where the chains had bitten deep. Every missing world, every silenced protest, this is why. They rule through fear. But this, she tapped the screen with trembling fingers, this could break them. Riker raked a hand through his sweat-matted hair. He had been a soldier once, before he was a mechanic. He had seen governments lie, but not like this. Not with a blueprint for genocide hiding in plain sight. Outside, the desert hummed with engines. Patrol ships, the Hegemony's dogs sweeping the sands, their searchlights carving through dust. Riker knew they were hunting for her, and for him now too. He grabbed the datapad, sliding it into the pocket of his jacket. If this is going to matter, we need to get it off this planet. A broadcast tower, long range. Something that can reach beyond the Hegemony's chokehold. Avlin's eyes flickered with hope and fear in equal measure. There's one, a relay station at the edge of the salt flats. Abandoned for decades, but its core might still burn. If we can reach it, if, Riker echoed. He holstered his blaster. Then that's where we go. They left the broken Corvette behind, its hull already marked with tracking paint. The sand stretched endless, dunes sharp as blades under the twin moons. Riker scavenged a sand skiff from the junkyard, barely held together with wire and rust, but its engine roared to life when he coaxed it with grease-stained hands. The journey was brutal. Wind lashed them, carrying grit that cut like glass. Avlin shivered under his spare coat, her strength still faltering, but her gaze remained locked on the horizon. Riker kept one hand on the controls and the other on the blaster at his hip. Every shadow looked like a patrol. Every light in the distance might be death. By dawn, the relay tower rose before them, jagged and skeletal against the pale sky. Once it had connected half a dozen systems. Now it was a tomb of steel, its spire cracked, its antennae draped with sand-scoured cables. Riker brought the skiff to a halt. Looks dead, Evelyn shook her head. Dead but not gone. The core's deep inside. If we can spark it, even for an hour, it's enough. They pushed inside, the air heavy with dust and silence. Riker's boots crunched over broken glass and rusted panels. He found the core chamber, a cylinder half buried in sand, its lights long since dark. With a mechanic's eye, he knelt, prying open conduits, coaxing wires. It would take hours they didn't have. The first patrol arrived before midday. Riker saw them from the broken window, black-armored riders skimming the flats, banners of the Hegemony whipping behind them. Dahan, they've found us, he hissed. Avlin clutched the datapad to her chest. We can't let them take it. Even if we die, the truth has to survive. Riker looked at her, at the fire in her eyes, at the chains still hanging from her wrists. He thought of the choice he had already made, back in the bazaar, and he knew there was no turning back. Then we hold them off, he said grimly. Long enough for me to light this tower. The sound of engines grew louder, a rising storm. Avlin placed her hand on his, steadying it. When the truth is free, the galaxy will remember what you did here. Riker managed a grim smile. Let's just make sure we live to see it. The patrol closed in, dust clouds boiling behind them. Inside the broken relay tower, a human mechanic and a chained alien girl prepared to stand against the Empire's wrath. Not for survival, but for the secret that could shatter the galaxy. They had the truth. Now they needed time, and time was running out. The relay tower shook with the rumble of engines. Outside, a squadron of black-armored patrol craft tore across the salt flats, their banners snapping like blades in the wind. Dust storms trailed behind them, shimmering with the heat of plasma engines. Riker's hands worked furiously inside the corroded relay core. Sparks bit his skin as he twisted melted couplings and rewired circuits that hadn't tasted power in decades. His breath came harsh, every nerve alive with the knowledge that death was closing in. How long? Avlin demanded. She crouched at the shattered window, the datapad clutched tight against her chest. Riker gritted his teeth. If I had a week, I could make it sing. If I had a day, I could make it work. But with patrols on us... He yanked a cable free, splicing it with a strip of copper scavenged from his belt. We'll be lucky if it coughs out a whisper. That whisper could save millions, Avlin said, her voice trembling but resolute. Outside, the riders slowed, forming a crescent around the tower. Weapons glinted in the sun. Then a voice thundered across a loud hailer, cold and commanding. Return the asset. Surrender the human. You are surrounded. Avlin flinched at the word asset, chains still clinking faintly at her wrists. Riker rose, blaster in hand, his jaw set like iron. Not today. The first volley struck. Plasma bolts tore through the tower's outer walls, sending shards of stone and steel across the floor. Avlin ducked low, shielding the datapad with her body. Riker fired back, each shot precise, forcing the riders to weave and scatter. But there were too many. Keep them busy, he shouted, diving back to the relay. He jammed a power cell into the ancient core, bypassing half a dozen safety systems. The chamber whined, shuddered, then flickered with faint blue light. The tower was waking. Avalon scrambled to his side, eyes wide. "It's working?" "Not yet," Riker growled. "Needs more juice." He glanced at her, sweat cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "That data pad, can you dump its core? Overload it into the system?" She blinked. "That would erase the files. Not if we time it right. We'll burn the relay alive with its charge, and the files will ride the signal out before it dies." Outside, the patrols regrouped. Two craft broke formation, rising higher, aiming heavy cannons at the tower's heart. Riker saw the glow of charging barrels and knew what it meant. "They're going to level us," Avalon cried. "Then we level them first," Riker snapped. He tossed her the blaster. "Cover me." She hesitated only a moment before catching it. Her hands shook, but her aim was steady. The blaster roared, its bolts slamming into the lead craft's engine. The vehicle spiraled down in smoke and fire, scattering the riders below. Riker tore back into the relay core, his fingers flying, his mind working faster than it had in years. The old machine moaned, then roared as the datapad's energy surged into its veins. Light bled up the spire, through broken conduits, to the cracked antenna high above. The tower groaned like a dying giant, then it spoke. A beam of energy, ragged but alive, lanced into the sky, carrying with it the Council's secrets. Voices of the High Council, cruel and arrogant, spilled into the comms of every patrol craft around them and beyond. The signal raced outward, past the flats, past the desert, echoing toward colonies that had long lived in silence. The riders froze, their comms screaming with their master's own corruption. Confusion fractured their ranks. Fear spread. Riker staggered from the core, sweat pouring, his body trembling with exhaustion. He grabbed Avalon's arm. "That's our cue. Time to run." They bolted for the sand skiff hidden at the tower's base. Plasma fire erupted behind them, wild and unfocused. But they didn't stop. The skiff roared to life under Riker's hands, engines screaming as they shot across the salt flats. Behind them, the relay tower collapsed in a storm of fire and dust. But its signal was already free, racing across the stars. Avalon clutched the edge of the skiff, her eyes locked on the rising suns. "They'll never forgive us for this." Riker grinned grimly, eyes on the horizon. "Good. That means we did it right." The patrols gave chase, but the galaxy was already listening. And the truth was no longer theirs to hide. The truth was out, and now nothing could stop it. The desert sun rose higher, bleeding fire into the sky as the sand skiff screamed across the flats. Patrol craft swarmed in pursuit, their cannons spitting fire, their banners of the Hegemony trailing like blades of shadow. Riker's knuckles were white on the controls, the skiff rattling beneath him as though it might shake apart at any second. Beside him, Avalon clutched the datapad, empty now, its energy spent in the relay tower's desperate broadcast. But her eyes were alive, shining with a hope she had never dared before. The secret was no longer theirs alone. "They'll kill us before we reach the mountains," Riker muttered, scanning the horizon. "Maybe," Avalon said, her voice calm despite the storm. "But it doesn't matter anymore. The signal is out. They can silence us, but they can't silence everyone." Behind them, the comms were alive with chaos. The patrols weren't just barking orders. They were arguing. Some demanded destruction. Others hesitated, their channels filled with the Council's own damning voices replayed over and over. The mighty Hegemony, unshakable for centuries, had cracked in an instant. Riker's lips twisted into a grin. "Looks like your masters didn't plan for their lies to go public." The skiff tore into the canyons, weaving through jagged stone as plasma fire seared the walls. Riker ducked low, hugging the shadows. The patrols followed, but disorganized now, their formations sloppy. Fear gnawed at them, just as surely as exhaustion gnawed at him. By dusk, the patrols peeled away, retreating toward the desert. Riker brought the skiff to a halt beneath a crumbling arch of stone. He slumped against the controls, chest heaving. "They'll be back," he said. Avalon's gaze was fixed on the stars just beginning to emerge above the canyon walls. "And so will others. The signal reached the colonies. People are hearing the truth right now. Some will resist it. Some will deny it. But others will rise." As the stars brightened, faint comms traffic began to bleed into their receiver. Not patrol commands this time. Voices, dozens of them. Angry, defiant. "We heard it. Wow, they lied." No more silence. Riker stared at the comms, disbelief washing over him. The galaxy wasn't waiting for leaders or armies. It was moving now, system by system, person by person. Avalyn turned to him, chains still hanging loosely from her wrists. Do you see it? You didn't just save me. You lit the fire. The hegemony has ruled by fear for generations, but fear dies in the light of truth. Riker rubbed his scarred hands over his face. He had wanted nothing more than a hyperdrive coil, just a way off this dust ball. Instead, he had stolen a secret and torn the mask off an empire. He chuckled bitterly. I never asked for this. No one ever does, Avalyn replied softly. But you chose it, and now you can't give it back. Above them, the stars shimmered brighter. Somewhere, ships were stirring. Somewhere, colonies were rising. The Council would unleash everything it had to smother this spark. But sparks spread fastest in the dark. Riker holstered his blaster and pushed himself upright. Then we'd better be ready, because they're coming. Avalyn smiled faintly, exhaustion etched deep in her features, but hope burning brighter. Let them come. The galaxy is listening now. For a long moment, the canyon was silent, but for the hum of the skiff's cooling engine. Then faintly across the comms came the sound of voices chanting, not in fear, not in submission, but in rebellion. Riker closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. He had been a mechanic, a soldier, a drifter, but now, unwilling or not, he was something else. The hegemony had tried to bury the truth in chains. Instead, it had found a human willing to break them. And in that breaking, the galaxy had been given its spark,